Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a major global economy, maybe one you wouldn't immediately think of, making a really significant move. In digital finance, we're diving into Brazil's recent legislative steps, specifically concerning Bitcoin. Yeah, we're talking Bill 4501-2023. People are calling it RESBiT. And look, this isn't just some minor regulation. It proposes something pretty bold, allocating up to 5% of the country's foreign exchange reserves directly into Bitcoin. Now, for a nation with a GDP in the trillions, that's not just pocket change. It's a serious commitment.
Right. And what's really fascinating here, I think, isn't just the percentage itself, though that's big. It's what this signals about national strategy. I mean, this bill has already passed its first committee. That's a significant step, right? A tangible move towards institutional adoption. We're talking national scales here, not just private firms. It feels like a real reevaluation of, well, financial security in the 21st century.
Exactly. So you might be asking, okay, why Brazil? Why now? And maybe, what does this actually mean for me, for the global economy?
That's exactly what we're going to explore in this deep dive. So let's get into that why. Why Brazil? I mean, this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? They've battled inflation historically, so they definitely understand the need for stable, maybe diversified assets. Plus, they're a powerhouse in Latin America, technologically quite advanced, especially with digital payments and things like Pix.
Yeah.
What else is driving this, you think?
Precisely. And if you connect it to the bigger picture, Brazil's economy, heavy on commodities, always watching that trade balance. Stability matters a lot. So their interest in Bitcoin, maybe it isn't just speculation. It could be about finding alternative hedges against traditional financial system issues. Maybe even de-dollarization talk plays into it. And they are a major emerging market. If they embrace digital finance like this, it could set a huge precedent for other nations in similar boats. Okay, that brings us to a really crucial point. Foreign exchange reserves. For a lot of people, that term might sound a bit, well, dry, economic jargon,
Right.
but it's critical here. So what are these reserves fundamentally, and why is putting Bitcoin into them such a, well, radical idea?
Right. So think of reserves as a country's financial safety net. It's a stash of foreign currencies, dollars, euros, maybe yen plus gold. They need it for international trade, managing their own currency's value, and crucially, for stability during crises. They're the bedrock. So diverting even 5%, usually from these super stable liquid assets, into something like Bitcoin, which, let's be honest, is known for volatility. That represents an extraordinary shift in risk tolerance and economic philosophy for a central bank. And the bill's name, our RESBiT Reserve of Bitcoin, it basically formalizes the government holding Bitcoin as an official state asset, not just an investment, but a strategic tool.
It does sound incredibly forward-thinking. But let's be frank here, many people would argue it's also incredibly risky. How would Brazil even begin to mitigate the volatility? Bitcoin's wild price swings. If it's part of reserves meant for stability, this is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Yeah. And this raises huge questions about risk management. I mean, the bill sets the percentage, but the actual doing of it, that would likely need some very sophisticated strategies, maybe managing price swings, maybe diversifying specific custody arrangements. Who knows yet? And you can't ignore the political side. There's bound to be massive debate inside Brazil and probably scrutiny from like the IMF international bodies. They tend to prefer more conservative reserve management traditionally.
Sure, makes sense.
But the potential upside for Brazil could be huge. More financial autonomy, maybe a hedge against global inflation, attracting investment from the whole digital asset world.
So, stepping back, what does this all mean? If RESBiT actually gets fully implemented, Brazil would become only the second country in Latin America, right? After
Yeah.
El Salvador, to legally set up a national Bitcoin reserve. But the key difference here is Brazil's sheer economic weight. It's a G20 economy.
Exactly. And that suggests maybe a subtle but really significant shift in how countries are starting to view economic stability and future reserves.
Yeah.
It seems we're seeing nations consider Bitcoin not just as, a speculative gamble, but potentially as part of their core financial strategy, like a legitimate piece of long-term economic planning.
Yeah.
It's not just El Salvador anymore. This is a major global player seriously exploring this path.
Right. So for you listening, this deep dive really highlights just how quickly the financial landscape is changing, how deeply nations are rethinking, well, their economic foundations. And the provocative thought we want to leave you with is this. How might these kinds of national allocations, putting digital assets into state reserves, how might that reshape global finance and maybe even power dynamics in the coming decades, especially if more countries decide to follow Brazil's potential lead?